You have quite a unique background, really. Like you transitioned from law to owning an antique mall. It's not straightforward.
I am owner with my wife. We are owners of the Saugatuck Antique Pavilion. When I go back to where I started in my law practice or in practicing law, along that process, an opportunity came up with a friend of mine who was buying out a retired law practice, and there was an opportunity to rent office space from her. So, somewhat naive, I jumped into that, not really thinking the fact that I truly was starting a business. There were so many issues that came up, and they're the things that you never think of, and there's a quick learning curve. The path that life was just rolling me down, it wasn't necessarily what I originally planned, but that's where I found myself.
So, Jim, firstly, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to put you on the spot straight away. I would like you to give me a 60-second pitch of who you are and your business, please.
Yes, certainly. Yeah, so 60 seconds, that's a tough one. But I am owner with my wife. We are owners of the Saugatuck Antique Pavilion, which is a 26,000 square foot antique mall in Western Michigan. We're in a resort town, not far from the Metro Detroit and Metro Chicago areas, a few hours drive, which tends to be a weekend destination for a lot of those areas. Our mall has 100 plus dealers that all specialize in different types of antiques, and we love it. We love the business. My background is in law, so I came to antiques in sort of a roundabout way, but overall, here we are, and it's something we both love.
That's great. So, you have quite a unique background, really. Like you've said, you transitioned from law to owning an antique mall. It's not straightforward. Can you share what inspired you to make such a significant shift and how your journey through different business stages has prepared you for this change?
Certainly. So, kind of following the theme of life cycles, when I go back to where I started in my law practice or in practicing law, coming out of my undergraduate program, I studied history. My primary goal was to actually work in museums and particularly in the historical field. So I anticipated going that way with my career initially. Um, I went to law school largely with that in mind that an advanced degree was almost necessary in that field. There were a lot of doctorates and people with masters in history and so forth. I felt law would set me apart in being able to understand the management of, museums tend to be either governmental organizations or nonprofit NGO organizations. So having that legal background, I felt would be a good fit. So I always had that interest in history, and that's what took me into law. I found, however, once I got into law and the practice of law in law school, that was very much tracked toward, at least where I was, the practice of law. So I had several internships that had me in traditional law practices. In doing so, I worked for a variety of attorneys over the years in a variety of different practice areas. Well, I say over the years, this is through law school and right when I took the bar and became an attorney. So I was a young associate, and that was the work in front of me. I did a lot of work in some civil rights litigation, some criminal law, some bankruptcy law, some personal injury law, family law. It was kind of whatever was handed to me, and that's what happens with young associates. So along that process, an opportunity came up with a friend of mine who was buying out a retired law practice. An attorney was retiring that she had worked for, and she was buying it out. And there was an opportunity to rent office space from her and and also get some clients coming in the door from her. That was, the path that life was just rolling me down. It wasn't necessarily what I originally planned, but that's where I found myself. So, somewhat naive, I jumped into that, not really thinking the fact that I truly was starting a business. I was just going to open my own practice, hang out my own shingle. And in that process, I went through a lot of those growing pains of starting a new business that I hadn't really taken into account. So, with that, that included, your cash flow and understanding that, marketing to get new clients in the door, your systems and processes so you weren't repeating the same steps over and over manually, uh, understanding different numbers and what conversion rates were, and all those factors that come into a business. And over time, I really discovered I loved that piece of it. And I really started to study that piece of it. And I enjoyed running the business more than I enjoyed the practice of law. Um, the lane that I wound up in law was family law, which tends to be highly emotionally driven types of law, like custody battles over children and divorces and um, a whole variety of protective orders for domestic abuse issues. And they were very mentally straining, and it wasn't something I really knew personally as a lawyer was sustainable. So I started shifting my practice a bit. I started honing in on the practice a bit, trying to practice in a way that was more focused on solving a client issue rather than um, just a traditional hire a lawyer and go to court kind of thing. And in that process, I really not only developed that passion for running a business, but I really started to understand it better. Fast forward several years, this is probably around 2009 or 10. In fact, funny side story: my wife and I were married on a Saturday in 2011, and based on the timing of all of this, I transitioned from the firm I had been working for to opening my own practice starting that Monday after. So it literally, got married and jumped straight into it. So my wife, she was very supportive through all that. But this is around the 2011 timeframe up until now, and uh, fast forwarding up to a few years ago, I had spent a lot of time helping and supporting other friends and acquaintances and other business professionals locally as sort of a consultant coach for them to help them grow their businesses and kind of get that stage, a lot like what you approach from that passion to the practice of their business kind of thing. And I really enjoyed that piece of it. And my law practice had sort of developed into a manner where a lot of it was automated and online, and I didn't have to really be in court like I had in the past. I had shifted more to a model that was sort of a done with you model of practice. What I would describe as a step between like a legal Zoom, here are your forms, go figure it out on your own, and go hire a traditional lawyer and pay the big bucks for us to take it to court for you, to more of a we'll help you do it yourself. So my demand for court time and that was really reduced down to just some online management and online consultations with clients. So my wife and I decided, hey, we really enjoy this. Maybe we look for an existing business in a field more in line with our passions and our interests. And in a roundabout way, as you look at these life cycles, rather than having uh, a passion that we try and made into a business, we had a unique opportunity to sort of take the passion and apply that to an existing business. And yeah, the rest is history. We bought the business. It was established we're coming up on the 20th anniversary this July. So it was established about 20 years ago. The previous owners were looking to move on and retire. So we bought the business in April of 2022, and we just passed our 2-year mark a few weeks ago. And we're now loving every minute of it. And I will say, kind of as the last kind of caveat to all that, is with the law practice, I still have that law practice and maintain the law online practice. I have a handful of clients I still maintain and work with, but I made a decision last summer that I'd rather put my energy into this antique mall business. So I kind of shut things off. I stopped taking new clients, and I'm just working with the existing clients for the moment. And we'll see where the future takes us on that business. But yeah, that's the short story long for you.
I like it. So you've experienced both the startup phase with the law practice, and you entered midstream then with a mature business with the Antique Pavilion. How do you compare these experiences in terms of challenges and learning curves?
That's a great question, because coming into the antique mall business, I wouldn't have imagined that they were quite that drastic of differences between the two. But to your point, I would say coming into the law practice, I I approached it like a lot of people starting businesses for their passion. Maybe mine wasn't quite the same passion, but starting a business with a bit, and not in a negative way, but a bit of a naive approach. You don't know what you don't know. So, all the things that come across your plate are new to you and surprises to you. And there's a quick learning curve. And I found that I enjoyed that. It kept things interesting, and you started to see results. You started to see other times where it wasn't very successful, but the quicker you learn from those, the better. But I don't want to say that it was easy by any means. It was very stressful in a lot of ways. But um, the the one thing looking back on that you really had the opportunity to do was make those decisions for yourself and sort of define that yourself. If something wasn't working, you could quickly switch and change tactics or directions and pivot in what you were doing to try and improve it. Um, that said, coming into a new business, I think I approached the new business, or not the new business, the existing business, a little more clinically and maybe theoretically than I should have. I thought, okay, I know these are the steps that I need to take to address, improve the marketing aspects of it, improve the systems, so on and so forth, that I came into with these ideas. And while I was able to implement those, coming into an existing business with existing client base being more so the vendors who sell items, existing management and sales team, staff, and so forth, the culture that pre-existed there, while not necessarily good or bad, not judging one being better or worse, was something that had to change. So coming in with those ideas, implementing the change was a lot harder than being me sitting behind a computer saying, I'm going to do this for my business. And then over time, building a team around you that kind of fits your vision. It was much more of a teaching an old dog new tricks in a way. This is why we're changing what we're doing and how. And it slowed the process of change down, which actually is probably good. It's kind of tempered things a little bit as I go and as we modify things. And it also has made me rethink a lot of the things that I do, because it has a bigger impact on others around us that wasn't a factor you have to take into account when you're a solo and you're on your own and you're that solopreneur who just can try something new. So there's benefits to both, but it's a difference that I wasn't quite anticipating or ready for. So, even when you buy a business, even when you've been in business 15 plus years, you're still learning. You just kind of accept that and know that that's kind of part of the fun and part of understanding it.
It sounds a little like going into the antiques business, although you bought into it rather than a startup. You went into it much more with your eyes open. You knew what the process was. You knew these were the steps that you needed to take, and you took that knowledge and applied it to the next phase.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Exactly. And just a very brief background on how the antiques business works, or at least how the antique mall model works in a lot of cases. I would imagine around the world, but I know particularly here in the US, is it's almost a landlord tenant relationship. So we operate the business, we rent spaces to different vendors who have their own antiques that they buy and sell. They sell them and then they pay rent and a commission to the mall. And our responsibility is both the checkout aspect of it and checking out customers as they come in, the marketing aspects of it, and we're basically the storefront for them to sell their goods. So while retail sales are important, and quite honestly my wife and I do have a space, we treat that more as kind of the hobby part of our business, selling the antiques that we go out and buy and find. But the primary business is creating a good venue for 100 other small businesses to be able to sell their wares. So knowing that, you're exactly right. We're trying to apply our business practices and experience to that new business, but doing so in a way where you're trying to take into account that you're affecting 100 other businesses along the way, and making sure you're doing it in a way that serves them just as much as it serves your business.
So it becomes collaborative more than competitive.
Entirely, entirely.
So, given your experience, what strategies have you found to be most effective for managing businesses or your businesses at different life cycle stages, particularly when you've gone from one business to another? And we've already really established that you have applied what you've learnt before and taken it across as well.
Sure. So the biggest piece that I've learned is something that doesn't always sound exciting to a lot of people who are entrepreneurs, but it's really the systems. It comes down to the systems. And the most minute systems, because in any growth that you have, um, being able to make sure that you have consistent delivery, know that the results are going to be the same, is incredibly important, whether you're a solo or have 20 employees. So, one, if I can assert this, but one influence that was a big influence for me early on was the E-Myth series and E-Myth Revisited books. Because it really emphasizes that building those systems allows you to step away from a business. That was very influential, because as an attorney in particular in that world, you have to have an attorney to do the legal work. It's not something that you can contract out easily unless you're going to contract to another attorney. But that means, the analogy that I constantly give is a business is like cranking that wheel on a machine. If you have to stand there and crank that wheel all the time and it's still producing, that's great. But the second that you step away for vacation, you get sick, you just need a break, that wheel's going to slow down and eventually stop producing. So it's finding out how to build systems that keep that wheel turning. And you're never going to have your hand completely off of the wheel, but more so enough that you know that it's going to consistently be moving forward in one avenue or another. So whether it's that law practice solo practitioner kind of thing, or if it's a bigger business with employees, having that system is important. So just, one other example that I'll give with the current business is we have a full-time manager who helps with the day-to-day and does a tremendous amount of work with that day-to-day. However, one of the reasons, the financial numbers were very good when we looked at the business. We did valuation processes to determine the value when we purchased the business, all the things you go through when you might buy a business. However, we are also looking for areas where we can make improvements. Obviously, that would help the business grow and make the decision justified. So one of the things that we saw is there was a great team that they had within it, but there were no systems in place to do it. So as soon as one person stepped away, that fantastic manager that you have, if he decides to move on or retire or something, heaven forbid, happens to that person, how do these things keep happening? So putting a lot of the attention over the past few years and sort of systematizing and automating what he does and what he has done, his number one made his life a lot easier. And we could shift his attention to new initiatives rather than keeping up with the day-to-day stuff. And also, kind of gives the business a little more stability to know that if he steps away, if we step away, things are still going to be able to move along. So it might not be the most exciting thing, but systems are a big piece of keeping that strength in the business.
I really like the Michael Gerber books, and I like the way that he talks about how we can make ourselves a profitable job. And I
Yes,
think if you're an attorney on your own, that's probably what you've done. And you've
yes,
made this huge shift, kind of skipped the management part to being the entrepreneur because now you get it that you need the management in there to then free you up to do the bigger picture stuff.
exactly. One of my favorite lines in that book that just hit home at that point in my business life cycle was that you basically are creating yourself a job rather than a business, and that you're your own worst boss. You've got a taskmaster for a boss in yourself, because you want all these things done and you have to make it happen, and you're pulling your hair out trying to accomplish it. And being able to step back from that, it's it's a relief. And you can start to look at your business from a distance and work on your business versus in your business. That whole model that he talks about. You get to look at it from the outside and say, this is something that is working, this is something that's not working, how can we make it work better, or how can we change how it works, rather than just dealing with, oh, I've got to get this thing filed by tomorrow, or I have to get this submitted. You're still going to have that, but if you take the time to look back, um, to some of the things that you've said, it allows you to look back and say, look at what we have accomplished along the way to get here. Where can we go to get to the next step?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in transitioning to owning the antique mall, what were some of the key growth strategies that you've implemented to ensure that the business not only sustained its success, but also expanded its reach?
That's a great question too, because that's been the number one question that we've been trying to approach in our creating our long-term strategic plan. So, one thing that you hear a lot in sort of the general media is that traditional brick and mortar retail is dying and fading away, and it's not the same world post Amazon, etc. I don't necessarily buy that. I think it's changing. There's no question that it's changing, but it's um, it's always going to be there. And I think coming out of the post sort of COVID world that we've been in, where everybody was forced home and a lot of places were forced to be closed, they're coming back in a different way, necessarily not the same they were before. So it means providing different services and resources to customers. Our approach is a little different because we recognize, for the most part, antiques are not a necessity. They're more of a luxury. People, yes, there's stories of thrifting and people going to buy something because they can use something that's used and make it last. And I understand that, but for the most part, it's something that they want. It's something that they remember having. It sparks that kind of nostalgic joy that they have in collecting. But it's something that they're doing for fun. So we've really wanted to sort of change that mindset of our location, particularly where we're located in a tourist area, and really thrive on that customer experience. Make it someplace where they come in, they feel like they're on the best treasure hunt they've been on in ages. Make them feel like this is a place I want to just come and browse around and hang around in. And then make things accessible to them that they can say, yeah, this is something I can take home. And, we set up our metrics on how we monitor that, but really the strategy that we've been trying to take is make that and promote it as a retail experience, to set it apart from I have to run to the store to buy this item or I can buy it on Amazon. That's not fun. We're not that store, and nor do we want to be that store. We're not going to run down to get your milk and eggs from the grocery store sort of place. So we want to capitalize on that experience, number one. Number two, the other thing that we really want to emphasize in that growth strategy is finding ways to be accessible online. Now, it doesn't necessarily, in our mind, and ask me in another year or two, my philosophy might change. We're trying to hone in on this, but it's not necessarily going to be an e-commerce store. It's difficult, number one, for us to be an e-commerce platform because the items that are being sold for 100 different dealers, and we don't have consistent inventory where we can go and buy 100 more of that widget that's been selling so well. Whatever comes in is what's found and what the dealers are able to access. So more so engaging with the customers on showing them what's available, what new items are coming in, providing knowledge and education on different pieces, the stories of those items. And that's the thing about antiques that I love. The stories of the pieces that come in really are what make the piece special and sort of take this tangible item and really expand beyond that. So helping on the online world connect the customer to those positive experiences and directing them to come in store for those purchases is where we're really trying to focus. All comes down to that one word, customer, or two words, I guess, customer experience. So that's our hope and goals. But one thing I will say with any strategy, like any business is going to face, you ask me again in a year or two, and that might be completely different. You kind of have to constantly evaluate and assess and see, okay, it seemed like a good idea then, but now we need to revisit it. So, you'll see where life takes us, but that's where we're at now.
I couldn't agree with you more that bricks and mortar has to be experiential because we're the tactile, we're the hands-on, we're the pick it up and see what it feels like, see what it smells like. And I think as owners of brick and mortar businesses, we have to acknowledge that and use that to our advantage because you can't do that with Amazon. You can't do that with e-commerce sites. And as a person who's actually quite tall, I rely very heavily on e-commerce to get clothes that fit me because I can't walk into a shop and pick up a pair of jeans and go, "Yeah, they'll be great," because there isn't anywhere locally to me that does that. I have to rely on e-commerce, but I would much prefer to go into a shop and go, "Oh, let me try that on." It doesn't work. Um, but what I would say about the digital element of a business when it is an experiential business, when it's a bricks and mortar business, that website then needs to be a reflection of the business. So people almost feel like they've visited you before they've visited you because they get a feel for it online.
Yes, I like that. That's a great way to put it. because you want them to connect in a way, uh, in a sense, almost emotionally as well. You know, you want them to have the passion that you have for what you're trying to share with them. So, you know, being able to make that connection before they even walk in the door is very important. I will say that shifting back to the legal profession in the line of work that I was in with custodies and divorce and very highly emotionally charged cases, that was a big aspect of one of the systems that I really focused on changing was the intake process. So with clients coming in the door with these very, very demanding challenges, the things like, you know, am I going to be able to see my kids? Are my kids going to be able to live with me or visit me? You know, very serious hit at home kind of stuff. The traditional law practice was very much schedule a consultation, come in, you got 10 minutes to tell me what's going on, and then I'm going to tell you legally do this, 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 and this. Okay, out the door. Here's how much it's going to be. See it kind of thing. Very cold, very sterile, very transactional that does not engage with the client's real need at the moment, which is more emotional, like, is there going to be somebody to support me through this? And you know, they say you're attorney at law and counselor at law. And I think counselor might not be in that traditional sense counselor, but it really is. It's guiding people through that to know where they, even though you're not going to be their psychiatrist, you're going to know how to connect them with resources. So I put a lot of attention into understanding the clients as they came in, refining my intake process at the time to make sure that I kind of had a sense of who that customer was before they even met with me. And then when we did get to that stage, there was already a rapport built through the online platforms and their contact with the practice before they even got to that stage. So they they were able to already feel like they had connected in a lot of those ways. And I felt like your relationship building, and I think in retail, it's just relationship building in a different way, and it's trying to find how to make those pieces align in a way that's customer centered.
Yeah, and I think part of that is creating community. So you'll have a community that's based around the business aside from the vendors. Certainly, like with my business, we have people that we connect with that then they become friends. They come back and see you, even though they don't need a service, they become part of your life. And as a business, you get to be known as part of the community that you'll interact and be and do for the community that you're located in as well.
Indeed. Yeah. And that's such a huge factor because we found so many other small businesses around that are in completely different industries, whether it's the food industry or service industries of all varieties, or trades. They're those connections that you make become very supportive of each of them, and you don't know the connections that you make until you make them. And one thing that might deviate a little bit from where we're going here, but I think is, to your point, incredibly important with that community aspect, is going into those relationships with sort of a giving attitude, an engaging attitude, and it will reap rewards years from now that you don't anticipate. And don't go into it expecting something, and you're going to get so much more out of it than going in saying, you know, what will I get out of this? If I give you this, will you give me that kind of thing? Just go out there and say, hey, I want to see you succeed. I want to succeed. Just here's my challenges. Here's your challenges. How can I help you? And then you don't even have to ask, how can you help me? Because, even if nothing comes of it, a year later, 6 months later, 6 years later, something will come up. I still get calls from a couple of friends of mine or I say friends, they are friends, but professional colleagues who say, hey, I've got this case in your area. Are you willing to do this? And a lot of times I say, hey, I'm stepping back from that part of it now. Send them to buy antiques. But, I'm stepping back from that part, but they're still reaching out for people that I helped years ago for no monetary gain, no gain of my own. It's just, hey, I see where you're at. I'm willing to help. So that community is so important to help you and to help each other. And the more you give to others around you, the better off everybody's going to feel when it's needed.
Yeah, so true. How have you incorporated innovation and adaptation into managing the antique mall? Could you share a specific instance where adapting to market changes significantly benefited the business?
Sure. So this is more of an internal thing, um, but as far as the business of the antique mall goes, it's very important, I think. So it's not necessarily customer facing, but it's helps the vendors that we have. So traditionally, the antiques market is probably not the most tech savvy in the grand scheme of things. You know, a lot of antique malls still do a lot of ink and paper sort of transactions where they write out the receipt, and you know, if you have 5 items you bring up from 5 different vendors, they write out 5 different receipts, and then you get a carbon copy and off you go and pay, and then they do all this bookkeeping with those papers to say, okay, this dealer sold this and that dealer sold that. Fortunately, the business we bought into was not that archaic, but um, it did have a system that a point of sale system that really, let's just say the company's been out of business for like 6 or 7 years or more. You know, the software wasn't supported any longer, but you know, it was working, it was getting by. Um, One thing that was very important to our dealers was being able to know their sales and being able to see what they sold. So the best the system was able to basically do with the old system was really just at the end of the night spit out a report that showed all the sales for the day by dealer, divided up, and then make it available for them to come and take a look at. Which, if you're trying to operate any kind of business, as you well know, having access to your numbers is incredibly important, especially your sales numbers. So, one of the first things that we implemented, and it took us several months because, to my point, you really had to do so in a way that you took into account 100 different businesses, 100 plus different businesses along the way. We researched and investigated a different point of sale system that was a little more up to speed. And what that offered that we particularly liked and our vendors liked was online portal that allowed them to log in and see their sales in real time. And it sounds, in my mind, it sounded like a no brainer, but implementing it was a little more difficult for people who had habits of how they had done things. But once it was implemented, I think most people found that it was so much more beneficial to them because some of them were just treating their businesses as a hobby, for instance. So knowing their numbers was a happy thing to know at the end of the day, but they didn't do much with it. Hey, yay, I sold X amount today. Yay, that's it. Others were trying to actually run them as true businesses. So they were tracking their inventory and what's sold and their margins and so forth, which made it incredibly difficult where they had to go and manually write down each sale and then transcribe it into their spreadsheet and then do tons of work to make that happen. So being able to do that, it allowed them to download their information directly into their spreadsheets or import it over. It allowed them to quickly see it and access it. And I think make it easier for them to run their businesses. And while that might not have shifted the needle too much as far as an innovation that would lead to growth, I think it was foundational for us to take any additional steps past that because until they were able to have those resources at their fingertips, we couldn't do a lot more beyond that. So it's one of those small kind of maybe, well, it's a big step obviously for the shift, but the impact might be relatively small, but it was a game changer for us in letting us do a lot of other things down the road.
I think people sometimes underestimate um, technology as a whole, but then even simple shifts in technology. So we changed our CRM system at IT Central, and the one that we had was fine. It was okay, but it was only okay. And we changed to one that was a lot more functionality to it. So we then had the learning curve of, okay, this looks different and this behaves different. What do we do? But now we've got a handle on it. We can do so much more with it. And more recently, we've changed our bookkeeping package. And that's been a learning curve and a half.
I would
But,
imagine.
oofed. But when we looked at our old system, our business is changing and we're scaling, and we need to know those figures and we need to be able to drill those figures down. And our other software, even though it's been around 20 years and is a good piece of software, wouldn't allow us to do that.
Hmm.
So it was a really, really big decision to go spoke to the accountant who said, "No, I really like that one. That one's really good." We're like, "Okay, fine." So we did that transition and it took several months to do it. We finally transitioned on the 1st of February. So we're 3 months in, February, March, April, we're 3 months in. Oh, we're still learning
I bet.
every day, but the potential when we get there is so much higher
Exactly.
that that investment is good.
It brings new problems in the operational piece of it, but it opens the door to so many other pieces. I agree completely. And there were so many issues that came up, and they're the things that you'd never think of. It's the obvious no-brainers. You're like, of course you do this to do that, and then you try and use the system in the way that you'd used it for who knows how many years before, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, it doesn't work that way. I have to do it. Wait, how do I do this simple task? And you figure it out, and it's not so bad. It's just a different way to skin the cat, so to speak. But it's yeah, we definitely can relate to that feeling. But fortunately, we implemented it March of last year, so we're just a little past a year of utilizing it. So it's kind of old hat now, and we're pretty comfortable with it. But yeah, it's a trick. But I will say the other piece about technology is I did make the mistakes early on in the law practice career of taking the mindset that technology solves all your problems and that this software will do all these wonderful things for me. Well, yeah, they'll do those things if you fully implement it and utilize it and make use of it and learn it. But it doesn't solve all the problems of, you still have to do a lot of that. So, one of the things that I found early on, which made this leap in the point of sale system, very slow and methodical, was learn the fundamental core of what it's going to do for you and learn that, and then utilize that as a tool to achieve your long-term goal. And who cares if it does 50 other things? Don't try and do all 50 at once. Just do that one. And then once you get that working, then start to add on. And yeah, that was a challenge in the law practice, because I jumped into a wonderful client management system that I wound up utilizing quite a bit. And it was a great tool, but I tried to jump in the deep end right off the bat when I got it. And I'm like, I was about to give up on it. And fortunately, they had a great tech department that kind of said, with what you're doing, why don't you just start with this piece of it? I think it was the billing piece of it, the time tracking and billing. And I got the hang of that, and then it grew from there. So, yeah, technology does not solve all problems on its own, but it's a lifesaver. If you make that as one tool in your toolbox, it can do so much for you.
Well, that's a whole lot of wisdom right there.
Yes, in your industry for sure, you can relate.
Oh, I can. Oh, I can. Based on your vast experiences, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are either just starting out or are considering purchasing an existing business?
Okay. Well, first off, vast experiences sounds way more than it is. I would say that the vast experiences is probably more vast mistakes and learning along the way than anything. But that said, in that kind of tongue in cheek a little bit, if somebody is thinking of starting out and starting their own business, I would say just go for it. Take that leap. I mean, there's obviously considerations you have to take into account, financially being able to support your family and so forth. But don't feel like you have to have thousands upon thousands in your account to jump into it and say, well, I can't start until I get to this point, or I can't do it because I don't have this team around me, or all these other pieces. Just jump into it and learn along the way. Start small. Start, maybe on the side. Start where you take your business and you start, where you have one or two clients and kind of test the waters. Engage with people to a point of that community. Don't be afraid to go out and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. As much as I still hate kind of to think of myself that way, you have to be a salesperson. You have to sell your services. And that doesn't necessarily mean, the cold call to somebody. That means, hey, this is what I do. This is what I provide. And I feel like I can help you. And this is how. So being able to kind of put yourself out there in a vulnerable spot is worth it. And take, step out of the shadow a little bit, and then a little bit more and a little bit more. And, you'll look back to your point, you'll see where you've come, and you'll be so much further away or further along than you thought, that it's entirely worth that leap. I will say that despite all of the headaches and challenges and stress and everything that goes along with owning a business, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I'm glad that I made that decision and I made that leap. and being able to have that approach to kind of controlling your own destiny is absolutely um, a wonderful experience. And yes, you have tough times and you have ups and downs, but it all works out in the end. I guess the last piece to your point of buying a business, um, I took the approach, and I'll just give the approach that we gave, or that my wife and I took when we looked to buy a business. We knew that we didn't want to buy a franchise, and nothing against franchises, but we opted against franchises because we were buying into an existing business that had very structured ways of doing things with a franchise and expectations on what you would do and how you would do it. So we didn't want to buy into a franchise in for that reason. We didn't want to buy a job. We wanted to buy a business that we could influence and grow. And we wanted to buy an established business, a business that wasn't, a startup last year that all of a sudden somebody's trying to make a quick buck on, because it hasn't had that time to prove itself and test itself. At least that was our approach. Um, and then from there, looking at the obviously the financials of the business, and valuing a business and determining that to determine you're paying a fair price, but also looking at how can you grow this business. You want a business that it's like buying a fixer-upper house. You don't want to buy the best house in the neighborhood, and the most expensive house in the neighborhood, because there's no more room to go up. You're kind of capped out, and all of your resources are buried into it. It's kind of looking for a fixer-upper. It's got good bones. It's a great house. It's been there, and it's got so much potential that that based on your skills and your abilities, you can make it something special and grow it into something special for either whether you're planning on exiting that business down the road or being in it long term, which is our hope. So, approaching something where you see an opportunity to and potential to improve it. I think that's our approach to it. I don't know if it's the quote unquote right approach or not, but that's the way we approached it. And you know, just go for it. Whoever's thinking about doing it, just take the leap. Think through the decisions, but and be methodical about it, but don't let analysis paralysis hold you back.
For sure. Looking forward, what are your plans for both of your businesses then? And what emerging trends do you think will impact other brick and mortar businesses?
That is a good question for my crystal ball, because I don't know those answers. Uh, but the
Have you got a crystal ball?
yeah, if only
If
that would be solve all the problems. But with the law practice, that one honestly is just kind of in limbo. I made the decision last summer that I wanted to focus on the antique mall business because I really have a heart and passion for it. So it's a thing that I still will work on. I still handle cases pre-existing and work on cases for existing clients that I've had in the past and previous clients, but I'm not taking on new caseload. So I don't know. I've contemplated whether or not it's something that I might look to sell and exit from completely, if it's something that I'll maintain sort of long term and maybe transition on the practice of law. I can utilize that law firm just for my licensing. Uh, Either way, maybe shift more into business law that supports other small businesses. But that future's not necessarily certain, and it hasn't been a huge priority. Fortunately, because of technology and other factors, I'm able to maintain that business and keep my overheads relatively low, that the revenue coming in is more than enough to sustain that business as it stands, even kind of in a dormant state. So that's an unknown. The antique mall, our hope is to sort of expand within this industry. Not only do we see vendors that really need more resources and help to kind of grow their businesses, and really, a lot of them are wanting to take that leap from, hey, I want to do this full time selling this and leave my day job. But they're at that transitional stage, which is kind of hard and risky. We also see other antique shops and antique malls that are smaller that could use a lot of benefits from implementing different systems and practices and marketing techniques and so forth. So, there's thoughts of providing resources for them in one manner or another, whether it's consulting or whether it's some sort of agency that provides some of these services for smaller businesses, or courses that might help them along the way. And then ultimately, perhaps buying another antique mall down the road in another location, sort of expanding the footprint to other locations. So we definitely want to grow. We definitely want to see this location thrive, but our vision is much broader than just the four square walls that we're in now. And who knows what the future has to hold. But that's kind of the dreams floating around. It's just getting those dreams to kind of fall in line with reality.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for your honesty.
You
It
bet, Lee.
it's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. Um, how can people find you and see what it is that you do?
Oh, sure. So the Antique Mall, you can find us at the Saugatuck Antique Pavilion.com. We're located in Saugatuck, Michigan, which is Saugatuck, Saugatuck, antiquepavilion.com, and that's all one long URL. You can also find us on social media, Instagram and Facebook, particularly at Saugatuck Antique Pavilion, and most of the other social media platforms you'll be able to find us if you search. But yeah, we if anybody is in the area and finds themselves visiting, we would love your input on what you guys think of it, and what your impressions are, because we're always looking to improve, and seeing people that come in the door and see what strikes true to them and what they like about it and what they don't like about it. It's all important to us. So we'd love your feedback, and love for anybody to visit if they're stateside.
It's definitely a day out that people should have. And what we'll do is we'll put all the information in the show notes to make it a little easier. Because although you spelt it, that's a difficult word.
It's a long word. Yes, we've got some fun city names here in the States for sure.
Oh, we do in Scotland too. Thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks again, Lee. Appreciate it.